Well, I'm glad you're here. Welcome. Thank you, Fred, for setting this up. Now, you guys are all from Pelican? No.
All over the district.
All over the district. Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, I'm so glad you joined us today. I hope you have a good day. Is this your first stop?
Yes, it is.
Wonderful. Yeah. Great. I'm Todd Kelstrom. I'm the mayor of the city of Klamath Falls. And I'll present what I view as the situation and hopefully get you started up. I know you're going to finish up with Mr. Gnong on I believe, a dam situation. Is that correct? And then you have a second stop up on... Okay. Yeah. All right. Is somebody meeting you there?
I want to ride the bus up there.
Ah, wonderful. Okay. Well, what I'd like to do is I'll just give what I can. It's a very complex issue with the whole river watershed system and all the people involved. Fairly complex, so I'll try to break it down in as simply as I can and hopefully as unbiased as we possibly can be. And I'll leave some room for questions for you because I hope you have some. And usually kids do have lots of questions. So, first off, is you have, and what you're here to talk about is the dams. There's 4 of them that are of interest on the river. Starting up here, there's more. There's Keno and Lake River, but let's not worry about that. There's 4 that we want to talk about. Those dams were put in many, many years ago with the purpose of flood control and to create electricity, hydropower. When water through turbines creates electricity, powers your homes. There's where these lights come from. Okay? And flood control, because you know we get there's a huge watershed with all the mountains we have, a lot of water in the springtime, and it offers a means of providing some flood control there. Those dams are owned by Pacific Power. They, however, are licensed by the federal government and that's an organization or an agency called FERC. Stands for Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Group of people that licenses and governs these things all over the country. Back in 1956, they issued licenses, permits for the dams to operate. Under what conditions would they operate? How long? 50 years. Those agreements expired in 2006, so 5 years ago. So, again, they're owned by Pacific or Pacific Power. I should say that. Okay, licensed by FERC. Licenses are up. Many things have come into play in the last 50 years. And essentially, in my view, it boils down to that the water that is available for the fish, for the farmers, for other entities, including environmentalists, was over-allocated. In other words, let's say we've got a gallon of water, and we've got enough people at the table that need about a gallon and a quart. So there wasn't enough water to answer everybody's needs. So what happened was they over-allocated the water. And in 2001, 10 years ago, the government, in essence, cut the farmers off from their irrigation water to grow the crops. And all the basin that we have down south of town and north of town as well, mostly south of south of town, and down in Two Lake, and all that, 240-some thousand acres. So that created a lot of concern with people. And what that did was it started a lot of arguing among people who wanted that water. Again, there's not enough water for everybody, so people started suing each other, very angry, a lot of dissension, and it was a very rough time socially in our town because people were very angry about the situation. You had, as an example, the people that wanted that water were tribes, the Indians and the indigenous people here. And you have them down in California, all along the river. But let's say, just for purposes of describing the dissension, the Yurok and the Hoopas and other tribes down in the California end, where the river runs into the ocean, wanted the water, wanted more water for salmon. Our tribes up here, the Klamaths, the Modocs, the Ahuskans, wanted the water up here for the suckerfish. Okay? So they were suing each other and suing us, and everybody was suing each other, everybody else, and it was just a mess. And then, as I mentioned, one other component is the farmers. All these people, men and women who are growing crops that we eat, potatoes, mint, all the products, some barley, all the hay, things that we eat and provide people to eat, the farmers were raising, didn't have water to raise those. So there's all sorts of arguments that people got into there, too. Talk about dissenting views. You have on-project people versus off-project. Farmers on the project are predominantly in the south, towards, between here and Tule Lake and beyond, people using that water. And you know the canal that we have running through town? That's called the A Canal. It breaks off. It's a wonderful system that they put in, gosh, in the 20s, I'm going to say, or earlier, where they dug this canal all the way, miles and miles and miles and miles of irrigation water coming out of a lake that they diverted to go out and irrigate former desert land to make it very, very productive farmland. Because it's prehistoric bottom soil. This used to be a lake in prehistoric times, and so there's all this rich, rich soil that grows products very well. So when they put water to it, it became very valuable. It grows products. The off-project people, and these are very simplistic terms, are those predominantly on north of the lake. We didn't necessarily get into that, but they have a real disagreement with taking the dams out and the way it was handled. Okay. Then, you have the environmental component of the problem. A lot of environmentalists want the river to run free so the salmon can come up and run wild, and it goes back to scenic, and the different, all sorts of different wildlife aspects to that are taken back to, let's call it a more natural state, without the dams like it used to be 100 years ago. And then again, these are very simple terms. It's much more complex than that, but I'm trying to keep it simple so we can grasp it. So you've got three people, not three people, but three groups of people, in essence, that are fighting each other for years and years. So when the relicensing came up, FERC told Pacific Power, you have to, because of these concerns, you have to alter or reconstruct these dams to allow fish passage, so the salmon can run the length of the river again. The people who own Pacific Power are, they're called stockholders, people who have invested money in it. It's a utility, people invest money, they're like owners, okay? So you have, there you've got stockholders who kind of are the owners, and then you have the ratepayers, people like Principal Bell, myself. We want electricity, so we pay for it. We're their customer, okay? Pacific Power, we are their customer. We pay the rate that they tell us to pay. So they make money for the stockholders who are the owners. So they have a real vested interest in this to provide a product, electricity for the lights, for their customers at a reasonable price. Okay, so they're on the hook now. Because FERC, again, says you've got to rebuild these dams to provide more fish passage. They do, their opinion is it's going to cost more money to do that than it would be to take the dams out. The list of requirements for them to retrofit or rebuild these dams is much more expensive than it would be for them to take the dams out. And they're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, by the way. But nevertheless, they're looking out for the ratepayers because it's going to cost more, so we're going to have to pay for it. Mr. Wilson and I would be paying more for electricity. Your moms and dads would be paying more. So they're looking out for us, kind of. They're looking out for their stockholders, kind of, who need to make money. So that's where kind of the problem lies. So you've got people, all these people fighting back and forth. You've got Pacific Power that needs to do something with the dams. The good part about this, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, is that all of these different entities, and there were like 23 different groups among these basic people that got together and said, we're sick and tired of fighting. We're sick and tired of butting heads, spending money on lawyers to sue each other. It's just bad for us. And it's not really accomplishing anything. Why don't we get together and see if we can work it out? So those 23 groups, lots of folks, met for, I think it was between 4.5 and 5 years. And they crafted an agreement. They crafted an agreement called the KBRA, Klamath Basin Restoration Agreement. And how they compromised, they gave and took. The tribes, our tribes, said, okay, we're not going to sue for all the water to time immemorial, forever and ever. They said, we'll give up some of what we've got so we have some water, and we want some land back, okay, that they can have for themselves. The farmers gave up a lot of things. Every group in there, all 23 groups, gave something, put it on the table, said, I can live without this if you give me what I really need. And it's just a heck of a great agreement. I don't know it front to back. All I know is it got people from fighting, and it got them to the table to say, let's agree on something. Let's see what we can do. Art of compromise. Wonderful part of our country is democracy, and this is the art of give and take, to me. Okay? So that's kind of where we are now. That's what you're seeing all these headlines in the paper, if you're reading the paper, is that people are fighting back and forth to take the dams out or not take them out. Quite frankly, it's my opinion, let me back up here. To do that is going to It's not going to be cheap. Remember I mentioned those hundreds of millions of dollars? Who's going to pay for that? Well, the federal government, not necessarily FERC, but the federal government needs to pony up, and don't quote me on this, but I think it's about $500 million. The state of California needs to come up with a couple or three, I don't know, again, no quote, no red hat, a couple of $100 million. In the state of Oregon, a couple of $100 million, like $800 million to do this whole thing, or $867, something like that. A lot of money. So, who's going to pay for that? Senator Merkley, from one of our senators, United States Senator, just introduced legislation to the government and to his colleagues to get us some money to do that. Senator Merkley believes in what was accomplished with this and says we need to move forward with this. And this is kind of precedent setting across the country. We're going to be one of the first ones to do this because there's a lot of people who say, we don't really need the dam, we've got wind power, we've got solar power, and that's a whole other argument I'll be willing to talk about if you want, but I don't want to get too confusing here. But that's kind of where we sit now. That money it could come from the government. That's going to be reliant on Congress to pass that legislation to get the money. But then the state of California needs to come up with money, and the state of Oregon too. So we're kind of in a state of flux right now. We're waiting for that decision. The Department of Interior, his name is Salazar. I call him Salad Bar, but it's trying to be funny. He has the unenviable task of reviewing all of the scientific evidence, and there's mounds of it, to see if it's worthy. Get this KBRA, if the agreement is a good thing, and if all the scientific evidence says this is a good thing to do. But that's where a big part of the problem lies between the on-project and off-project. The off-project guys say it's bad science, the on-project guys say it's good science, the tribes say it's good science, everybody involved in the KBRA says it's good science, but the opponents say it's bad science. So, we're still fighting, not as bad, but we're still not decisive on which way to go yet. That thoroughly confusing?
Do you guys have questions? Do you guys write down any questions you have?
I didn't think of any.
Yes.
So I put, you used the word allocate or something like that. I
Yes.
don't remember what, but I wanted to know what that meant.
Allocate?
That's a good question.
In simple terms, we've got a cake here. We've got to feed all you guys. I'm going to allocate you a portion.
Oh, so it's
You,
like
him a
split.
portion, and on down the line.
Okay, and then, yeah, that's all I have. Oh wait, what does the A stand for in CBRA?
So, agreement. Klamath Basin Restoration Agreement. Yes, sir.
Well, if they were wanting to restore the dams, couldn't they just put the dams 6 inch underwater, put them underwater so the salmon can still swim?
That's a good point. And I don't know how that's going to be. And that's a very good point. In Washington, there's a dam called the Condit Dam. And if you go back in the Herald News this week, they blew a hole in the bottom of it. Man, there goes the water. And so that's essentially what's going to happen there. Now, whether they can take the rest of it out, I don't know. I asked a friend of mine who's very knowledgeable on this, is that kind of the model for how to do this? And he said, we don't know yet. We're going to wait and see what happens. One of the bad things that happens is that on these dams, there's 50 plus years of dirt, sediment that has washed down, and they don't know, they estimate millions of cubic yards behind each one. That's got to go somewhere when you open the gate, as it were, blow a hole in it. And sure enough, at the Condit Dam, it looked like mud just flowing out of the thing. Well, that ruins all the stream down below as far as
And it
fishing.
would kill more salmon than it would save.
Yes. Good point. That's very accurate, very astute. The environmentalists say, yeah, but it'll kill them now, and we don't know how long it's going to keep killing them because it can fill in their spawning beds,
Right.
And so they won't be able, they're saying, we don't know the answer to that, in my opinion. Could be 4 years, 5 years, we don't know. But the environmentalists are willing to give that up to someday, hopefully the salmon will be restored. Very astute comment. Yes?
I have an idea. Why didn't they could have just like built a little stream at the side that lets out a little bit of water, and the salmon could flow, get up that way if they don't make it too hard.
That's a good point.
And that doesn't even remove the dam.
He should be in charge. They do that. The Keno Dam it's a lower dam, it's a smaller dam, much smaller. And it does have fish ladders. We don't need to take that one out because it has adequate ladders, and you just can't have a stream because it'll go too fast. But what it does is it goes into a pool that drips into another pool so the fish can doink, jump into one, jump into the other, like a ladder. You climb a ladder, they don't have legs, so they need to swim, so they get into one and the other. And so that allows for passage, you're right. Some of these are too tall. I don't know the scientific, but they did look at that. And they looked at, I think they called it trap and truck, where they gather the fish from down below, catch them in a net, put them in a truck, go around the dam, dump them in the reservoir, let them go to the next level. That was one of the things they did look at. Well, I don't know where it ended up. Yes, and then yes.
The last one of the 4 dams is one that's 173 feet tall, so that one would really difficult to get up.
I didn't know that. That's good. Glad you were here. Yes?
Didn't they just like make little rivers going into the different areas of Oregon so everyone can share it?
Those are all good thoughts. If you look at them, if you look at the pictures of them, I think they're available. They're very steep canyons on some of them. So it's not just flat ground, it's steep canyons. So the topography does not really allow for that. Would be my answer. I'm sure there's more educated answers than mine, but that would be the way I would respond to that. Yes, sir?
If they were to restore the dam, could they make smaller individual dams and have like maybe 10 different pieces?
You mean 10 different smaller dams? I suppose, I think your cost would be, and then your point, I'm guessing, is to get to the fish, so the fish could go over those little smaller dams easier. That's possible. Anything's possible. Depends how much money you want to spend. But the idea behind the bigger ones is, the 173 foot, is you store water, and that's how they generate electricity. They let the streams come in and they fill it up, and then the turbines are down underneath, and then so they let that pressure from the reservoir run those turbines. It's like a propeller kind of thing. It turns those turbines, and those create electricity from that. With a smaller dam, you wouldn't have that pressure to create the turbines. So it really wouldn't be effectual from an energy standpoint. Okay?
The 173 foot one, that one actually produced only 18 kilowatt.
Probably megawatts, but yes. That's all right. Yeah.
But yeah, so it makes the least of the 4 dams, even though it's really tall. Now I get why not it.
Part of the equation, that's a good point. Part of the equation is the arguments against removal is it's environmentalist, it's clean, renewable energy, doesn't hurt anything, doesn't kill fish, doesn't kill birds like the wind turbines can, and that kind of stuff. But the issue is, in my opinion, again, is that from the environmentalist side, they want us, and matter of fact, legislation is in place to, the amount of electricity it takes to run these lights, 25% of that by the year 2025 needs to come from alternate energies like wind and or solar. That's mandated, that's going to be law. So they're saying, so that's why you're seeing all these, the wind turbines up in the Columbia Gorge and the windier areas, that's why you're seeing an advent in those. And again, those are stockholder driven to make money. So the answer to that is, I don't agree with it, but I'm not part of the equation here, is that you already have this, why knock it out and replace it with the other ones? But people are taking a different approach from it. Yes?
Now, which one would you rather do? Would you rather take it out or leave it in? The dam, if you were in charge, or are
If I was in charge, very difficult question, very complex again, because it doesn't make sense to me, and this is one of the arguments I personally have, and let me back up a little bit. I think it would be terribly arrogant of me, as one voice, to tell all those 23 agencies who spent 4.5 to 5 years, hundreds of thousands of hours collaborating, getting along, compromising. It would be terribly arrogant of me to say, you did it wrong. Personally, I have a problem with the silt, you know, when they blow the dams up and ruin them. Personally, I have a problem with that and the environmentalists looking in the other way, as it were, saying, well, it's okay to ruin the fish for 4 or 5 years. We'll live with that. That kind of goes against your principle, and I don't like that. I have my principles, and I think I stick with them. So, for that reason, and for ratepayers and stockholders, it's a question of money. I want to see my electric bill as reasonable as it possibly can be. So, taking them out seems to be mathematically more sensible. Do I like the fact that fish would run free, as it were, or swim free? Yeah. You know, I really don't have a dog in that fight, as sometimes we say, fish in that fight. So, really, my point is, I don't have a say in it. I don't really have anything to do with it. Quite frankly, nobody here does. It's going to be up to the federal government, the state of California, state of Oregon, and Pacific Power. I can slam my shoe on the table and say this is wrong. It doesn't make a whit of difference. I have my opinion, and I think it's important that you have opinions too, educated ones, and that's why you're here, to learn the facts, and it's important that you know what you're talking about. But realistically, they don't. I could go to Washington, D.C. and testify, and they wouldn't give a whit whether I say yes or no. So that doesn't really answer your question, but I would like to say that be educated, form your opinion, and be humble about your opinion. That, you know, there are other sides that might have differing views for you.
So either way, you're like kind of okay. Like
I'm okay with it.
yeah, okay.
And here's why. Because this KBRA, that takes the dams out. You can't say, I agree with the KBRA, but I don't want the dams to come out, because that's part of this component. And all these people agreed to that, which is included in the agreement. So the dams have to come out for that reason. Okay? Can't have it both ways. So yeah, I guess ultimately that's part of the agreement. I agree with those people that made those compromises and those collaborative efforts. So the dams should come out because of that. Good question. Glad you
Good answer too.
I know.
Aren't they awesome?
Good answer too.
Any other questions? Yes?
Why don't we just do partial removal of dams?
Well, it's kind of an all or nothing thing. You got, if you're going to restore the passage for the fish, you got to have a hole in the thing, or take it all the way out. If you're going to create electricity, you got to leave them in. So there's no real middle ground in that area, in that arena. Does that make sense? These turbines either have to be there or they don't. If, like this Conduit Dam, and maybe go back, if you got a newspaper at home, go back and see the picture of that. And I think you can see it online on the Herald News website as well. I think they have a video on there. You can see quite a sight.
Yeah, I saw it.
Did you?
Just
Yeah. So I don't think there's middle ground there. They either have to be in or have to come out, one of the two. Or have a big hole in the middle, but that reduces the dams to non-functional as far as generation of electricity and flood control and all of that. So they're either in or out. Other questions? Anything else you want to know about? Why are we here? Why is there air?
Okay, guys, can you say thank you, Mayor Kallstrom?
Thank you.
Thank you, it's been my pleasure. I
Really
really
so
appreciate your
much.
time.
Really
Really do.
appreciate it.
Excellent, excellent.
Glad to do it.